Hello, everybody. How you doing? Good to see you. Really happy to be here today with a couple of folks that maybe have some pretty interesting insights about, you obviously been talking about computer vision for all day, but maybe now we'll talk about it in a more specific sense of just talking about CX. My name's Mark Beccue. I'm principal analyst with OMDIA. My main area of focus is all about AI applications, and the operationalizing AI. Thank you. So that's what I look at. I do some computer vision things, so we're familiar with this, but these are the experts, so we're going to talk to them about them. I'll let them introduce themselves, and I'm going to hand the mic over to Brad, who's going to introduce himself.
Thank you, Mark. Hi, everybody. My name is Brad Hastedt. I'm the Director of DataForce North America out of our Dallas, Texas office. We support AI and machine learning teams with human annotated training data and collection for projects ranging from speech to text, speech recognition, to natural language generation, conversational AI, and of course, computer vision, which is what we're here to talk about today. As we know, data quality is paramount when building AI and machine learning models, and that's where we really partner alongside with our clients to optimize those data sets, not only at the beginning part of the model building process, but throughout as iterations occur.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. Hello, everyone. My name is Sailesh Krishnamurthy. I work as a machine learning manager at 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven's R&D. They call it 7 Next. I mostly focus, or at least I would consider myself good at taking things from 0 to 1, is what we call it. So taking things from concept to pilot. So I worked on our first cashierless store project, kind of did a pilot with that. We have a store at our headquarters now. And then right now we're working on a self-checkout system. That's basically a normal self-checkout on steroids. You have a kiosk, you just place your items on the kiosk, it just pull it up automatically. Then you can swipe your card, take your items and leave. So I work as a machine learning manager under an umbrella called a frictionless checkout umbrella, and my team tackles the machine learning algorithm and the actual, the magic in the cashierless store and the self-checkout system. So that's what we do.
We're going to pass this back and forth, but I have a question for you because, interestingly, you're talking a little bit about how you're starting to implement that. So can you talk about that, like in the use case sense, a little bit more about what's going on at 7-Eleven?
Sure, absolutely. So at R&D, we mostly focus on what they call as Horizon 2, Horizon 3. So it's not the usual day-to-day, store forecasting or, kind of predicting what the sales would be. It's more of what we call as revolutionizing convenience. Because 7-Eleven has usually been in the forefront of convenience for a long time. And then we've kind of slowed down, I would say, but we wanted to get back into the digital space and kind of show that we were at the forefront of convenience. Mainly because 7-Eleven, I think, introduced the first self-serve coffee, to-go coffee, self-serve soda fountains. That's one of the reasons why you can find both Coke and Pepsi at a 7-Eleven fountain. But at some retails, you'll have either Pepsi or Coke. So that's one of the reasons why in R&D, at least, we wanted to focus on the next step. So the first project we actually did in one of the first projects in R&D was cashierless store, and then now the self-checkout. The idea behind that is right now at our stores, checkout lane in a convenience store, you just want to get in, get something and leave. You're not shopping there. You're not going into the store to shop. So you have to make sure you pick your items and then you're able to check out and leave. The main choke point is at the cashier area, mainly because you have labor shortages. So you have only one person at the register. So you have a huge line standing. I personally I'll just peek from the outside of the store. If there's a huge line, I'll just not even go in. So one of the main things we want to solve was how do we just make sure things are easier there. So any immediate short-term improvements would be done by the general 7-Eleven team. Since we were at R&D, we were looking at what would be the next stage in solving for convenience. So the first thing we looked at was a cashierless store. Amazon Go had already done it at that time. So it kind of makes sense for a 7-Eleven also because most of our 7-Eleven stores are small stores, so you don't have a huge footprint to put hundreds of cameras. So it makes sense to have a few tens of cameras, put a small compute at the edge itself, and kind of solve for convenience right there. So that's where we started with cashierless store. And the self-checkout came out mainly because cashless store has its pros and cons. Because you can do new stores, cashless. Existing stores, you have to do some extra work. You have to rip off the ceiling, put new cameras. There are startups that do camera only, but we might want to do sensors at the shelf. So you have to like change the shelves too. So it's a lot of work there. So the self-checkout would be just something you drop on the counter. It'll just make it an easier convenience factor. So the idea was to have both of these lanes and let the customers choose what they want to do. So we would pilot both based on where the customers lean. We would scale that out. So that's the overall idea.
We're going to get to Brad here in a sec. So another one, I don't know if you guys have heard this, but it reminded me of some of these use cases that have been brought out a few years about CX and computer vision, and it kind of riffs on what you're talking about. One was smart shelves. Remember, so the idea that you could, given the cameras on the shelves, and you would maybe be able to, I don't know if it's profile, but you're looking at a certain customer and you say, well, is that a Coke or Pepsi person? Or do I want to serve them up a certain kind of ad based on their rough demographic, right? So this never really took off yet. I know there's been some discussions about it, so it's kind of a interesting idea. I don't know what kind of algorithms we'd run for that, but that was one that's been out there. The other one is more on this, and it's interesting because you're in retail, the autonomous stores, and that idea that CX gets better when you, like you said, you make their experience quicker, right? So you move them through the store, that's pretty good. But we really haven't seen Amazon Fresh take off, really, right? So you mentioned that. So I think that's interesting to hear about some of these. All right, we'll leave it at that for a second, and we're going to go to Brad. The big question we're going to ask first, so I kind of set that up as, do you think computer vision can make CX better? Here's a couple of examples we talked about in retail. Okay, there's probably others, right? So Brad, do you think CX can make CX? Do you think CV can make CX better?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, some of the stuff that Sailesh talked about and that if anybody saw his presentation earlier with the autonomous stores, it's fascinating, and making that experience more seamless is just going to be better for a user experience going forward. I look to other industries as well, other verticals like healthcare, for example. Working a few healthcare engagements that, when we talk about customer experience, we also talk about patient experience, right? And how can we enhance the patient experience by potentially diagnosing something a little bit earlier that it may have been without computer vision, or making suggestions for a patient that a particular doctor that might treat that particular skin disorder that they may have. We're working on with some clients that are we're doing some fascinating things in the healthcare space that I think 3 years from now, I think we had talked about over email. 3 years from now, 5 years from now is just going to enhance that patient experience moving forward.
Yes. Just a little more about other ideas that you might. Do you think CV will make CX better past those ideas that are working through?
Absolutely, mainly because like autonomous stores, checkouts, these are like kind of visual, like that they are going to make things easier, but there are other small things too. For example, when COVID happened, like there were contactless checkouts and contactless interactions needed, and Intel had this very good solution where you can use their RealSense cameras, and it will just be on the top of any touch screen or even a normal screen, and then you don't have to touch the screen at all. You can just like come right near the screen and kind of point at things you want to touch, and it'll just automatically interact with the screen. Small things like that. It's still computer vision, right? So it makes your experience itself easier. There are like startups. I'm trying the names. Skipping my mind, but that also do something called projection screens, where you just project something on on any surface, and then you can interact with that surface too. So it kind of brings you a screen where there are no screens. So you can make anything a touch screen. So showing personalized ads, having customers interact with those ads, like those things would just transform customer experience itself. So small things like that would change. Yeah.
So this next question is about challenges, and I'm going to guess at one, because I don't know, but I'm going to ask you guys what you think. When you think about computer vision and what are the main challenges to it making CX happen? And one that I'm going to guess is maybe power, latency, you know, because a lot of both the examples you gave were really real-time examples. So the question is, what are the main barriers to this moving forward? Is latency one? So that's a two-part question.
Yeah, I would say generally in the conversations I'm having, it's quality of data. That comes up consistently. Quality of data. Yeah, but also where responsible data. Where are we sourcing data responsibly? And where are we getting it from? How is it labeled? How is it tagged? How is it structured for you know, what do we need to tag for when we're building machine learning models? You know, those are specific to teams, you know, different engagements. But that's a topic that comes up all the time. And another one is frankly bandwidth, because there's so much data. It's quantity also of data, right? And it's team, as I'm sure Sailesh can attest to, they're busy. Teams are really busy, and so they need help addressing this quantity of data issue as well. And that's, you know, kind of where we come in and support with those types of projects as well. But those are probably the two ones that pop up generally in conversations consistently.
Obviously data, I was going to say that too. That's a very obvious answer. But one thing I would add to what Brad said was, you have to have responsible data, the right data. It should be annotated the right way. And people tell that to you when you start out, but I've learned it, at least my team, we've learned it the hard way, that, you know, even with this right data, the right, diverse data that helps you kind of generalize your models, the work on actually, you know, finding the right model, the right, architecture to choose, it's kind of shadowed by the need for data itself. I mean, engineers, it's a problem of the engineers, machine learning engineers, to actually find these, research these. But the main thing is there's so much happening in AI and ML. There's a new architecture that comes up every month. Like, you know, in every time a major conference happens, CVPR, new IPS, you have these huge inventions that come out, and it's just very hard to keep up. Sometimes even with the right domain-specific data, just like, you know, pushing all this data through a model wouldn't actually get you the result you need. So focus on, after the data, the model, and also the right way to evaluate that model is very important. And there are more tools now that make things easier. So I'm happy it's coming up. But more than, or not more than, after data, this is what I see as a major problem. So that you're evaluating your model the right way. Because sometimes you use classical evaluation metrics, you know, MAPs, all of that. It just evaluates based on very basic parameters. Sometimes you have to do it based on your applications, like, you know, how specific it is in our example, in classifying flavors versus, you know, brands. So you have to go deep into the evaluation itself, and using tools, thinking through that problem, think that would, because that is what connects to the customer. After that, it's just the customer, right? So making that better is where, you know, it'll connect to the customer. Mostly the engineers won't think through in depth. It's mostly, you know, the product folks or people who are more familiar with the customers, instructing the engineers, telling them, this is what you have to focus on mostly. And that communication I'm seeing is getting better than 5 years ago, because now most people understand machine learning till more than 5 years ago. So non-technical folks giving their feedback, their domain knowledge, would make this last part of the model training and model evaluation even better.
So I want to go back to you, Brad, on this, because I think he brings up a good point. We did some study on AI risk, right? And this idea that you're talking about data integrity and data, how you can use it and that kind of thing. We're getting close to where these things are going to get regulated. But we're also at a point where companies think about the risk involved, right? So they're thinking about what risk do I take, you know, liability, things like that. It made me think, with your example at the stores, how long you keep data is an issue, right? How you can use that data is an issue, because you don't want to transfer it, you know, those kinds of things. So there's some privacy, security, are these big issues. Talk about that a little bit more. So you started down that road. Do you see issues where this is, you mentioned it, but can you expand on a little bit more about the risk? Do you think it's more liabilities to companies that you're seeing, or is that what's going on with you guys?
Yeah, it could be somewhat. It's having an overall data governance strategy, which firms, if they don't have it already, they're gonna have to, whether it be a chief data officer or a chief AI officer or someone that actually writes down the corporate policy on the handling of data, and specifically data for AI and machine learning. The other part of that too, when we talk about responsible AI, another term you'll hear is ethical AI. Data sets, it's not just data science teams or machine learning teams that need to be diverse and have different people that are on the team building these models. It's the data set too. The data set has to be diverse, and that's what I mean by where are we sourcing this data from. I think it's important to source globally from many different groups, from many different perspectives, so that you can create the best data set possible and mitigate. I don't think we'll ever eliminate, I don't know, you might agree, I'd like your take on this, but mitigate as much bias in that data set as possible. And that's really what we're seeing.
Yep. Sailesh, you get in on that too. Can you tell us about data governance and how that's impacting what you're doing with CX?
Yeah, I can add a little more, depth to the model side of the data governance itself. Mainly because, for example, say, again, I'm bringing up the same problem: item classification, right? We're not. We source our own data. We make sure it's diverse. It's an item classification. We're not doing. We're not detecting people there. But even with items, what we do is we don't train our models from scratch. We always take an already existing model that has learned something and build on top of it. And this applies to most computer vision applications or AI applications, right? So what happens is when you take something like that, you don't know what bias is already inherent in that model. Either you are exacerbating the bias that's already there, or you're not seeing it because it's implicit. You have a test set that doesn't have the right variety to test these things. So you test for your own small problem, everything works well. The moment you put out, the real world is just crazy, right? So, and suddenly something happens. And it's not the intent. No one actually does this as intent to discriminate. It's just that identifying that or understanding that these bias can be in places where you don't even have control over. So even if you take an existing model that's already trained and improve on it, you have to make sure, look at that data, what it was trained on. If you don't have access to the data, maybe you just don't use it. Even if it would have made your life better, you should take the choice to, okay, I just don't know what it would cause, what problems it would cause, and I would probably just train it myself to make sure I don't have the bias I have, bias it has, and make sure I can, provide a common ground for these models to work on. The other thing I would add is for the data governance, for people detection or anything that involves personally identifiable information, right? I have seen most companies do, or even Google does it for a long time, they kind of blur faces. While storing itself, you kind of encrypt it, because these days it's very hard to, it's a very blurry area, I would say, mainly because you are being seen through cameras. At some way or the other, it's easy to say it is you. Like, companies have to cut that line somewhere and then encrypt the parts that point to each other, so that I cannot say this number is this person. In my models, I would always have these people as XYZ or ABC or something. I shouldn't have a label that tags them directly. At the same time, there should not be any table that maps XYZ to Sailesh. So that is basically that's basically how we do we manage data governance. So make sure that these mappings are not there. That way, no one, even with malicious intent inside, cannot actually access. Yes.
So this next question, and Brad, think about it from the CX perspective. Obviously, Sailesh will do this. What are you learning, right, on the journey? So on this journey to using computer vision for CX, what have been some of the learnings you can share?
From more of a holistic point of view, I would say more aware. The conversations that we're having is more awareness and even AI evangelism in CX. For CV, but AI in general too. Just being more communicative about the power of these types of projects and how it can really enhance your business. you know, working with like big tech, for example, or you know, teams like Sailesh have, they know the power of AI and computer vision in the customer experience. But you'd be surprised how many conversations with some other sectors where they might be more in the beginning of their digital transformation or their AI transformation, and you've got to educate. Yeah. And I would say holistically, that's been my biggest learning, if you will, is really continuing to evangelize and have these conversations. And we have, in DataForce, we have the pleasure of having many of these different conversations with many different companies in many different industries, and really taking some of those best practices that are being used in one industry and saying, hey, you guys should think about this. You could do this too. You know, a lot of potential clients and current clients aren't aware. And so it's really creating that awareness still of the power of AI, I think, and particularly computer vision.
When I talk about learnings, especially for CV and CX, one of the main things I saw personally was engineers should not pretend they understand customers. I mean, I know it's kind of a strong opinion. Me being an engineer personally, I've had this you know, kind of notion too, because I can give an example, I guess, for the self-checkout system, right? So when we build the system, we kind of make some assumptions. We're like, okay, customers are going to interact this way, place the items over here, and then you kind of build around that. The moment you put it in front of the customers, it's like they do completely, you know, diametrically opposite things. For example, if you have a packet of chips, right? We have cameras on the sides, on the top. If you place the chips upright, we can say, okay, it's a Cheetos, and say what it is a Cheetos. Customers mostly 90% of the times place it like flipped on the platform, mainly because we are all you know, trained to show the barcode to whatever system it is, right? It's cameras, barcode scanner, doesn't matter. You show the barcode, so they automatically flip it, and I can't say what it is at all because it looks the same for every single packet of chips. So it's like that's one of the reasons why, you know, making sure that there are domain-specific you know, partners are working with you, so that while building systems itself, the problem is then I have spent enough time, 3 to 4 months building, assuming these things and building systems, and I have to roll things back or accommodate those things, right? So having these conversations early, make sure that, you know, you're actually hitting the customers, because, I mean, you can blame the customers for all you want. They are behaving erratically and all that, but at the end of the day, I'm a customer too, right? So when I go use a system, I behave the same way. Even though I understand tech, I am, you know, I'm like, oh my God, why is this like this, right? So you have to understand that you have to work for a common Joe, and make sure it's easy. It's okay if it adds burden on you. I mean, that's your job. Like, make sure it's easy for the customer. So understanding customers directly is important.
So we're going to stop here. I want to be respectful of your time and see if there's any questions in the audience. Oh, gee, we have a lot. Okay.
You scan the barcode with your camera?
Sorry.
It's a great question. We did try that. The main problem is, so barcodes have these black and white lines. From the camera, when you look at them, unless you're looking at them upright and at a, you know, certain distance, they kind of get smudged together. They get blurry. Even if one line gets smudged to the other, you kind of lose information. So you have to be close, upright, without any reflections or whatever. It has to be clean. Especially some of these energy drinks have like shiny cans. You cannot see them from the cameras at all. Even the barcode scanners struggle. You have to like scan multiple angles. So we tried that, and it was a failure. We did try to accommodate that by putting cameras close by, but if you're going to give customers this freedom to place it on a kiosk anywhere, then this camera should have multiple degree view, like 360-degree view, right? That makes just the hardware very, you know, hard to maintain. It's just I have to put a camera everywhere. Then I might as well just directly scan the barcode. Like, why go through this hoops, right? So that's one of the reasons why we are like just CV.
I have 2 questions that are sort of related to Sailesh. First to you, and you gave the chip example, which was a really good one. How do you incorporate human factors and also consumer journey mapping in your development process as well as pilots?
Do you say human factors?
Yeah.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
Human factors, specifically how your customers
Mhm.
are actually behaving in the environment, and to learn from those behaviors. And after that learning, you incorporate that in your actions, in your either the algorithm or the system. But looking at this from a design thinking approach, and utilizing that research and that understanding back into the loop.
Yeah, so we did do like a simple customer analysis by bringing 15, 20 customers into our lab, kind of testing things. Nothing tells you the reality like going to the customer directly. So we did pilot one of our checkouts, I think 4 months ago in a store nearby our office. That is where we found the customers flipping items. We didn't even have a customer like show the barcode to the camera like this, right? So the usual process is just we kind of have employees at the store. We kind of educate them, tell them this is how it works, and then ask them to make note of what's going on. So anything that they interact with that happens within the kiosk, we kind of capture the images. We have the touch patterns. We kind of learn from that. But any other behavior is like you cannot do that from the cameras you have. You have to have someone else looking at the customers, identifying patterns. So we have the employees. So we did create like a feedback procedure where, to be simple, it was just me going to the employees and asking them how it's going on, like what do you see different. In scale, you'll probably have to do this, you have to sample this. You cannot do this in every single store. So the best case would be to just start this in a few stores, learn from those few stores, all of these things. You can't learn everything, obviously, but you learn as much as possible, and then scale so that at scale, it's hard to capture these things. You'll be sampling. You'll probably focus at 10 stores out of 100. And if like one store is terrible, you go deep down and then you zoom in and you kind of do more analysis. So that's how we do.
And the follow-up question I had was, you mentioned this again briefly earlier in the panel too. What are your thoughts about the explainable AI, specifically when you are actually very much consumer facing?
So that can be split into two things. Explainability for the engineer so that I understand what it's learning, because we kind of see where the activations are. There are some tools that help you do that to see, okay, if it's looking at the logo or it's looking at the bottle cap or the bottom of the bottle or like things like that. That kind of tells me what it's learning. So I will force it to look at the logo and like all these fancy pictures on the wrappers. That helps me identify things. The explainability for the customer side is different. It's we haven't really gone into that because we do have customers kind of perplexed on how this even works. They're afraid to go into in front of the cameras, because if one camera looks at their face or it's pointed to their face, they'll be afraid, even if you don't look at faces at all, right? So we haven't really gone in depth into doing something like that. But explainability for engineers, yeah, we have tools.
We've got a question over here.
Yeah, I had a question just to build on the point that you mentioned right now. So mostly most of our customers are like end customers, and right now when they are when AI comes in front of them, they feel that their privacy is being invaded. And sometimes even me, although being in AI, I would not let an app allow me to track. So how are we doing as an AI community? How can we build that trust with our customers? What are we taking the steps to build this trust with them?
That's a great question. I haven't done a lot of reading about this, so I'm sorry if I'm a little scrambled. But at least in 711, what we do is, there's an example. I'm sorry if I'm taking too much of time.
No, we're good. This is a great question.
There was an example where, so when we did the cashierless store for the first time, I had to talk to one of our team members in InfoSec, in networking security. And then I was telling them, we have this cashierless store, please go check out. They were like, no, I won't. I told them, no, I built it, because it was just 4 of us at the time. I was the machine learning lead, engineer, everything. And I told him, I built it. I'm not looking at faces. Don't worry at all. No data is captured or calculated. I don't have time for that. You can just go in. He just didn't believe me at all. He was like, so even people in tech, especially people in tech, are not comfortable going in front of a camera. So I think it's very hard for individual companies to kind of change people's minds. It has to happen over time, because especially with a common notion that big corporations always collect your data. It's just very prevalent. All of us know that. Once that is ingrained in your mind, it's hard to get out of that. Even when I go to an Amazon Go store, I'm like, oh, is there someone on the other side looking at me right now? Are they doing something? it always runs in. My take would be it'll take a long time to get that out of our heads, and it'll probably just be that way, unfortunately.
Yeah, go right ahead.
So we did do some research on that. It came up in the risks thing. And what I mentioned earlier, I think you're going to run into, Brad, you probably ran into this as well, is that right now this is in the hands of every enterprise. It's their responsibility because there are not necessarily laws in the United States. There might be some soon, and by California and different places where they're saying these things. So you'll have a legislative way that you have to do it whether you like to or not. But right now it's up to the individual company to make these decisions based on the risk they might be hitting and saying, do I need to tell these people or not? What risk do I take if I don't? You know, so they're going through a risk assessment of what could happen.
Yeah, and also just one last point on that is I think it goes to being, to my point from earlier, us as an AI community, both non-technical and technical folks, continuing to be evangelists for AI and the benefits, and like Sailesh has presented today, on how this is really enhancing the human experience, and then also for people that are still afraid of AI, because they are out there, saying AI is not here to replace you, it's here to augment the human experience. Right? AI is an augmentation, not AI as a replacement. And we really have to continue to push that in everywhere we are, whether it's conferences, online, or what have you.
We will augment with one last question.
A very short answer to her was educating customers. Are your companies, like 7-Eleven, or doing any efforts to educate customer on how things work?
How things work, and I think there are some basic instructions that you get when you first start using something that has AI in it or something that has a complex interaction to it. For example, when you go to the cashier store, there'll be screens outside that tell you how to use. You have to scan, install the app, get the QR code, scan, and go in. So there are things that explain, but those are instructional explanations for using the tool and not any deeper at all, right? So because you can't go into depth of actually telling how the detection or tracking is done in the cashierless store right at the entrance, because it's probably not the right place. Maybe, I don't know, again, I haven't thought about this in depth, so maybe providing tools, say for example, you're asking them to install an app, have links inside that explains, how this is done. Yeah, so because, for example, when DALL-E came out, DALL-E 2, the first thing we did was, at least I did, was go and see how DALL-E works, what it was trained on, So it should be easy to access how something is built, how it works. Only that will, kind of exchange things.